Welcome back. This is part 2 of taking a ride, and I'm still on the Braidwood Road heading east of Goulburn. In the last video I went through the little village of Tirranna, or Tirrannaville. Locals just call it Tirranna, but I think the correct name for it is Tirrannaville. Essentially what is there is a school, and across the road is a large farm, and around in the surrounding area of what it constitutes the village, the population is something like 250 people. Just near the village of Tirranna is the Wakefield Park Raceway, which has been closed for a long time but is about to reopen. There was an issue with the previous owners in that when they purchased the property and opened it and began to operate it, the council, the Goulburn Mulwaree Council, imposed certain restrictions on them in terms of noise levels and the number of days per year they could operate. They got to the point where they said, well, we can't make a profit if we can only operate those days of the year, and we want to operate a larger number of days. The matter ended up in the Land and Environment Court in New South Wales, and the Land and Environment Court ruled in favour of the council, saying that the people who operated the racetrack were familiar with the terms and conditions when they bought the when they started operating the place, and it was no grounds had been made for changing the terms and conditions. Wakefield Park, I should mention for those who don't know, is a car raceway track, and it's used a lot. Many of the car reviewers that report for newspapers and various websites bring the cars down to Wakefield Park for the track testing, and also they have days where you can basically go out there and race your own car or motorcycle around the place, as well as all sorts of competitions, show and shines and those sorts of things. It had been, according to some reports, a fairly lucrative earner in terms of how much money it brought into the town, because when they had these track days and when they had these special events, let's say the MG Club, when I talk about MGs I mean the old British version of the MGs and so on, when they had those days, lots of people came to the town for the weekend and stayed and spent money in the town, restaurants and cafes and so forth, and they say it brought a lot of money into the town. But the people who lived near the track complained bitterly about the noise, and as I said, the Land and Environment Court ruled in their favour, or in the council's favour. So eventually the people who owned the track put it on the market, and it closed it, and it was put on the market. It was sold, and my understanding is that the family that used to own the Shelley's soft drink business, that you might remember, were people who came around on trucks and delivered soft drinks to your house back in the day, who had plenty of money apparently. They sold the business to Coke or Pepsi or somebody like that, I guess. They bought the track, and they've done extensive earthworks to raise banks and put in what they say are features that will absorb the sound and make it less intrusive to the countryside around it for the people who live around there, so that it will have less effect on their quality of life, if you like. And the track is about to or is going to reopen in the near future. So the petrol heads no doubt are looking forward to that, as are some of the businesses in Goulburn, and that's probably a good thing, because if we want the economy of our town to continue to grow and to continue to provide jobs for people as well as recreational activity, then that is one of those things. So I passed through the village of Tirranna in the last video, and now I'm heading east of Goulburn towards the village of Lake Bathurst, which I'll get to and talk to about in a moment. This is the Goulburn Braidwood Road, as I've said, and you can see just in the section where I've just gone past it, in some places in very poor condition, potholes and patches upon patches upon patches, which make the driving and riding experience not the greatest. It's difficult on this motorcycle because of the width of it to avoid. On a two-wheel motorcycle, you can kind of pick a path. One wheel follows the other through the potholes if you can see them far enough in advance, and through the patches and so on. But it's difficult to do that with this bike because it's, as I said in the earlier video, as wide as a small hatch at the front, and therefore if one wheel doesn't pick up the patches and the divots and the places where the road's in a mess like it is just here, the other wheel will. And whilst there's not a lot of unpleasantness through the handlebars, and the suspension at the front's pretty good. I've never ridden on the back, but I had my brother on the back a little while ago, and he felt the suspension was a bit uncomfortable. There is a switch on the handlebars where you can adjust the suspension to make it a little softer or harder if you have a pillion passenger, and I'd forgotten about that and didn't do that when he was on the bike with me. So unfortunately, I guess he caught the back of through the back wheel the unevenness of a couple of the roads that I took him on that day. So anyway, as you can see, the road is in various conditions here, and a little bit further along you'll see that there are some roadworks being done to improve not only the surface of the road but the alignment of the road. You can see this section here where I'm going, there are the markings on the centre of the road as I've talked about before, and markings on either side of the road so you know where the edge of the road is, and there is a bit of a shoulder there, which means if you wanted to pull off the road on your two-wheel motorcycle, you could do so and put down the stand and be on hard, firm ground, so you wouldn't be concerned about it sinking into the soft soil of the shoulder and possibly being hard to get off the stand, or maybe even tipping over or something. I mentioned in the last video it was quite a windy day, and you may not be able to pick that up as I'm going through, but the trees are certainly blowing very strongly there. Although it's fairly cloudless and blue sky, it is quite windy. Not cold windy in the sense of being unpleasant that you'd need several layers of clothing on to keep the wind off, but enough to make the riding experience a little hairy, should I say, in some places. So at the moment I'm sort of midway between Tirranna and Lake Bathurst, and I think I'm coming up to an area called Inverrollocky. And at Inverrollocky there was at one stage a very large pastoral concern, which I think was mainly to do with wool growing, and I think that's just it on the left hand side as I'm going past now, and I'm going to cross the Inverrollocky Creek in a moment. At various times the Inverrollocky station had been an agricultural training college. It had been a drug rehabilitation centre at one stage, and I believe now that it's run by a religious group, a Catholic associated with the Catholic Church, who were the owners at a previous point when it was an agricultural training college, or part of the agriculture training college for St Patrick's College, and it's where some people go to train to be priests, I think. So it passed through there. At one stage it had its own railway siding because the production of wool was so big that there was so much wool being produced that it was necessary for the train to go there and collect the wool. The railway siding closed in I think the early 70s. Railway line still does go to Tarrago, so if you get the train from Sydney to Queanbeyan, it goes through Tarrago and past this Inverrollocky siding and also past Tarrago. Most of the rail traffic that goes to Tarrago is protrusible waste from Sydney, which is taken to the bio extractor, I think it's called, where the protrusible waste is allowed to rot and the methane gas is extracted and used to provide power for the, I think, desalination plant in Sydney. Anyway, all of that's a bit further along when we get to Tarrago in the next clip. you can see on the left-hand side of the road lots of trees. There's a mixture of, I think, eucalyptus and native trees and also pine trees. And I think the pine trees, I'm certain that the pine trees were planted to act as windbreaks for the paddocks and the farms and farmhouses, because the wind tends to blow from the south across those open fields on the right-hand side, across the road to the left-hand side, as it is doing now. And in winter, that wind is quite icy because it is coming from the snow in the southern Alps, around the snowy mountains and so on, and it can be quite cold and bitter. So I'm fairly certain that these pine trees and trees along here were planted on purpose to provide windbreaks, and also therefore to provide some protection for animals during winter time. It always interests me talking about that in wintertime you often hear in our weather forecasts about a sheep weather alert. What that means is the weather is going to be really cold and there's potential for the sheep to freeze to death, or to be bitterly cold and be uncomfortable throughout the night. Now, what I find interesting about that is, of course, sheep are covered in wool, and wool is a fibre that we're told is a naturally warm fibre, and we're encouraged to wear woolen jumpers rather than cardigans and things like that, rather than things made out of synthetics. Yet the weather can be so cold sometimes that it threatens, especially lambs and young sheep would be vulnerable to during those sheep weather alerts. The crossing we just passed on the right-hand side is the Coven Creek Road crossing, which takes you across the railway line and then up into an area called Coven Creek, where there are a couple of properties as well. There wasn't a lot of traffic on the road today, but it was a weekday that I was doing this ride. No, it wasn't. That's not correct. No, it was Sunday. It was a Sunday that I was doing this riding, so there wasn't a lot of traffic on the road. Now we're just coming into the village of Lake Bathurst. There is actually a lake, but the lake is closer to Tirranna, which is a bit further on and into the next clip. The lake was discovered by white people in 1818 by explorer Hamilton Hume and surveyor James Meehan, who were sent by then Governor of New South Wales, in fact probably Governor of all of Australia at that time, Lachlan Macquarie, to explore a route from the east coast through to Canberra. And they came across Lake Bathurst and named it after I think he was the Secretary for the Colonies or something like that. It's a lake that varies in size from about 2 square kilometres to 10 square kilometres, depending on rainfall and evaporation rates and inflows and so on. It's quite shallow, so it's a little bit like Lake George. It's a bit further on, but not quite as big. At one stage there used to be recreational activities on it, but I don't think that's the case any longer. The area here of Lake Bathurst was settled in around 1826, and there are some buildings as you go through the little village here that were built during that era of the early settlement that are still here. There's a schoolhouse. The school's been closed since the early 70s, but the schoolhouse is still there and is now a private residence. There is also a church, and I don't think the church operates. There are no services held at the church, but the church is still there, and the cemetery that surrounds it. And I think that the church is still in fairly good condition. And there's also the church hall that was built around the same time. I should say this is, when I said this was earlier, it was discovered by white people. It's undoubtedly a fact that the Ngunnawal people for whom this area is their country would have known about the lake. And according to some reports I read, there are artefacts found around the shores of Lake George that date back 20,000 years. So it's more than likely that the local Indigenous population certainly knew about Lake George. I don't know if there's, like I said, there used to be recreational activity there. I don't know if there's any fishing or any fish in the lake. I know at one stage there used to be water skiing, but I'm not sure about fishing. So we've passed through Lake Bathurst. We're on the way to Tarrago, and you can see there's road work being done here to realign the road, but also to resurface the road, rather than just fix up the potholes that they've decided to completely resurface it. There's a small section here that will eventually be sealed and therefore much safer to drive. When talking about the railway line, it's just on the right-hand side there. It all runs parallel to the road until you get to Tarrago, and then it turns south towards Bungendore. All right, well, I think I've covered all the things I want to talk about in this particular clip. I hope you've enjoyed the scenery and enjoyed my commentary, and I'll be providing you with more when I'm making the next video, or making part 3 of the video, which will take you through the village of Tarrago and then making a turn towards the north onto the Nerriga Road. Thank you for watching, and if you have any comments or feedback, please feel free to offer them when the clip is uploaded.